here that make up my brick wall. Now I'm going to create some effectors and some fields to control the assembly of this wall, so I have these bricks falling into place. So what I'm going to do is make sure that my cloner is selected. I'm going to go to my MoGraph menu and create a plane effector. Now what I want to do is push these bricks up in the y-axis. So in my plane effector, I'm going to go to its parameters and I'm going to push this value right up. Now depending on your scene, if you're following this, you might have different values in here. I've got about 2,000 centimeters to start with. I might adjust that later if I need to. So there's my plane effector pushing the bricks up. The next thing I want is a field which will control which of these bricks are up in the air affected by the plane effector and which of them are down on the ground. So let's grab the plane effector, go to the fall off tab and create a linear field. If you don't see linear field here, click and hold this button and in the list there you'll be able to create a linear field. So here's the linear field. It's these two rectangular shapes, and what happens is if I move these in this x-axis through my bricks, you can see it's dropping the bricks down row by row into place. Now I'm going to show a couple of variations on how to set this up. I'm just going to start with this basic one with my field going horizontally through those clones. So I'm going to set some keyframes. So first of all, let's go back to frame 0. Let's position that field where I want it, so it's just outside of my clones. It's not having any effect at the moment. So I'm at frame 0, field's in the right place, hit the keyframe button. Now I'm going to go forward, I'll do 2 seconds. I'm looking at 25 frames a second, so I'm going forward in time to frame 50. I'm going to move the linear field so that it's all the way through the bricks, and I'm going to keyframe it again. So there we can see we've got a keyframe, these little dots on the timeline. And if I hit play, there's all the bricks dropping into place. So that's okay, but it's not particularly interesting. It would be really nice if we had a little bit more movement and motion of those bricks. So what I want to do is create a bit of randomness. I want to break up these bricks and have them sort of tumble and spin a little more. So I'm going to do that with a random effector. Now while I'm making my random effector, I'm actually going to turn off my plane effector. This makes it easier to see what the random effector is doing. So again, make sure you've got your cloner selected. Go to your MoGraph menu and under the Effector tab, create a random effector. Now in the random effector, I'm going to randomize the position a little bit. So that's already turned on with a bit of randomization there. I'm also going to change the rotation a little bit. So I'm going to put maybe somewhere around 90 degrees or something like that for these bricks, so they rotate as well as change their position. So in exactly the same way that we created a plane effector and ran a linear field through it to turn this effect on and off, we're going to do the same with the random. So we're going to create the random effector, we're going to go to the fall off tab and create a linear field, and again if we grab that linear field and move it from side to side, it will go through and turn our random effect on or off. Now, in exactly the same way that I keyframed my linear field for my plane effector, I could keyframe this one as well. However, there's a little bit of a shortcut that we can do which makes things a little quicker and easier, and that is actually to parent this random field to the plane effector field. Now this is all getting confusing with a bunch of effectors and a bunch of fields, so what I'm going to do is just rename my fields for a start. So this field here is controlling the position, so I'm going to just abbreviate that to POSN, and this random effector, I'm just going to rename this RND for random, so I know which is which. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the random effectors field follow the plane effectors field. It's going to do exactly the same thing. So I'm going to go to frame 0 on my timeline, I'm going to grab the random effector field and I'm going to position it pretty much in the same place as the plane effector field. So there they are sitting on top of each other. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to parent the random field onto the position field. So I'm just going to drag and drop it so it's now a child of the position field. This means this will just follow along with any animation that the position field is doing. So what will happen is the bricks will drop into place and the random tumbling or rotating effect will turn off at the same time. So let's check that out by turning the plane effector back on. And now if I just scrub through my timeline, there's my bricks tumbling randomly into place. So they're going from this plane affected, random affected cluster of bricks up above, and they're falling in as those plane effectors and random effectors fields move through them and turning off. So that's looking pretty good. So I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, so that's one way to do this process. The other way is if you think about sort of more of a real world kind of physical approach to how a brick wall might fall together, I could imagine that it would probably fall from the bottom upwards. So the bricks would stack from the bottom on top of each other. So what I'm going to do here is just turn off my random effector just for a second. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my position field and I'm going to change its properties so that it actually runs upwards through my clones. And this will give a different pattern or style for the way that these bricks fall into place. So if I go to my plane effector and go to its position field, in the field settings, we've got a direction that this field is going to go. By default, it goes in the X direction, sideways across our screen. I'm going to change this to positive Y. Now what this will mean is as I grab that field effector and move it up, it's now moving up through the bricks from the bottom to the top. So these bricks are actually falling into place row by row, which is a little more kind of physically feasible. Now what I should really do, if I'm going to change this animation and the style of these fields, I need to do that with my random effector as well. So I'm going to go into this random field and change that to positive Y as well. I'm going to turn that one back on, and I'm just going to test this by grabbing that position field and moving it upwards, and we can see our bricks falling and tumbling into place. Now the speed of that motion, the way that it's changing, I don't really like, but I can fix that. But the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change my keyframes, because currently my fields are animating sideways through the scene. Now that I've changed these to work in the Y-axis, we need to move the fields up and down in the Y-axis. So my initial keyframe is fine. Frame 0, where it is there is fine. But at frame 50, what I need to do is I'm just going to shift my fields back to pretty much where they started from. It doesn't have to be 100% accurate. And I'm going to move them up in space until all of those bricks have fallen into place. And then I'm going to re-keyframe it. So now I should have my bricks falling into space, falling into place, sorry. So that's looking pretty good. Now, looking at this, my bricks are starting to fall at the first frame before I've even started. So what I may need to do is just grab that position field, just pull it down a little further, just to make sure it's not affecting those yet, and just re-keyframe it. There we go, now they're all falling into place. Now, I would like the bricks at the moment, as they tumble, they're only flipping, they're only sort of rotating into place right before they land. I would like that to happen sooner, and the way that I do that is to change the gap in my random field here. So when you look at these fields, they have the two rectangles, and what these represent is where the change of the positional rotation of our bricks is. So on one side of this, they're fully rotated and positioned out of shot up above where our bricks are going to land. At the bottom side of the field, they will be in place, and the random effector will be not affecting them. So what I can do is, if I go to my random field, I can actually extend this by just clicking and dragging on these points. I'm also going to extend, or move this, sorry, I'm going to move it upwards so its base sits at the bottom of my plane effector. This means that once both of these fields have passed all the way through, they sort of end at the same time. These bottom rectangles represent sort of the end of that motion. So let's have a look and see what's happening there now. If I just zoom out a little and then scrub through. So now I can see the bricks are rotating a little sooner. And it's not just in the last sort of frame or two that they flip into place. Now I might accentuate that effect even further, so I'm going to extend this random effector further, and again I'm going to move it upwards so the bottom of it pretty much matches my plane effector, and what I should see is these start to tumble much earlier. So as we bring those up, so I can see already, and we can see it as well with the changing color. If you don't have a material on your cloner, you'll see a slight change in color, and we can see straight away they're already starting to tumble a little sooner into place. So I've just put a little bit more control over how my bricks actually fall there. Now another thing that you can do if you want to change this even further, if you want your bricks assembling, say, from a bottom corner, we could move our fields in a diagonal motion across the bricks to fine-tune this even further. And again, we'll have to re-keyframe if we do that. So I'm going to grab my position field. See, that's the parent of my random field. So this is the one that we need to be moving and changing the keyframes on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my rotate tool, and I'm going to rotate it over, maybe around about 45 degrees. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, oh, I should have set a keyframe there. I forgot to do that, and that's flipped back to where it was. So let me redo that. So let's grab that, rotate it over around about 45 degrees. I'm not going to be too precise, and keyframe it. Now I'm going to go forwards to frame 50. I'm just going to rotate that over again to around about 40 degrees, and I'm also going to move it in this axis, its own green axis there, till it's passed all the way through. And as you can see there, it's kind of shaving them off at an angle. The bricks, it's sort of shaving them off at an angle. And don't forget to re-keyframe. So now these effectors are moving diagonally through the bricks, which means we get sort of dropping and assembling from one side to the other. So as you can see, the way that we set up our fields moving through our clones can give a real variety of shapes and styles. But that's looking pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that now. If I want to, I can fix the timing. I can slow that down a little bit. But that's looking pretty good.